take a look at Daas Tevunos for today. We have a few things to squeeze in. We're on page Samach Gimel in the Daas Tevunos, paragraph 78 for those who are following by the paragraphs. And the Ramchal explained to us where the guf comes from and where the neshama comes from. The guf is a creation of, let's start with the neshama. The neshama is a creation where God's light, quote unquote, emanates, quote unquote, whatever these things mean, but it's a creation that lights. And it's because it lights, it wants to do good. Light lights up an area so that it can benefit everyone in the area. It lights up. Darkness is a place, except for people who are hiding from something. And sometimes darkness is good. You're hiding from an enemy. But generally speaking, darkness means a place where a person can't function in a constructive way. You can't do things in the dark. You fall in the dark. When it's light, you can work, you can learn, you can do constructive things. So the Rebbeinu Shalom create the neshama from light. It's a light in terms of giving off light, and also it's light, as we explained yesterday, in terms of weight. It's the fastest thing in the world. As far the last time I read, 186,000 miles per second. So it's not dense like the guf. Now, why is the guf dense? God created the neshama and God created the guf. Why are they two different, so opposite things? Because when God created the midas tuvai, God created from his complete midah of toiv, and the midah of toiv means lehetiv, to benefit others. That's God's given definition of good. Good means to bestow good on others, whether it's your time, your efforts, your understanding, your money, whatever it is, toiv means lehetiv. And that's why God created the world. Again, we have the yichud there, and we'll believe that we touched upon it. We're going to put the yichud and the hatova together. A Friedlander has mimer, an essay on this. So Rebbeinu Shalom created the neshama from toiv, from or, and therefore the neshama is full of light. The Rebbeinu Shalom, the same way he created the world, b'derech tzimtzum, whatever we call tzimtzum, constriction, the Rebbeinu Shalom constricted this light, and as a result, you have now a guf that is dense, dark, heavy, because the light did not fully shine into it. It's the tzimtzum. So the guf is a creation of tzimtzum ha'or. The neshama is a creation of the or. So the same way the greater world was created, the physical greater world was created through a tzimtzum, man also has a component part, that's tzimtzum, which is his body. It's a constricted, limited thing, dark and dense. The neshama is a creation of light and wants to go into neshama. We learned about this for the last few weeks. The tachlis of the neshama coming into the body is to lift up the body, to light the body. And like Moshe Rabbeinu, eventually the light shines through the flesh. The dark, dense flesh shines through the face, and people can literally, the neshama is radiating. We're not talking about a nice complexion. Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama radiated through his guf, because his neshama dominated and took over the guf to the extent that it's possible for a human being. So now, not only is this creation, but this is also hanhaga. This is also the way the Rebbeinu Shalom runs the world. Creation occurred through certain things being created with a ha'oras panim, with light, hatova, the idea of being a giver. The neshama is a giver. It wants to give. And there are things that are physical, like the guf, that are betzimtzum, that is a taker. I want, I desire, give me. And the neshama needs to harness that using the tools of Torah and mitzvahs. And the same way that's true in the way the world was created. Now the world is created, there are certain things that are kulei ruchni. malachim. There are certain things that are kula gashmi, an animal. Man is the only creation where the Rebbeinu Shalom Vayitzer, there are two yuds in Vayitzer and Bereshis. The Rebbeinu Shalom took this heavenly neshama and put into this physical guf and wants them to live together. For the reasons we mentioned, it gets, the person does this, the neshama does the avodas Hashem, it goes to all the neshamas, the body decomposes because the chet, eitzat, as, tov, ra, come back at Tchias HaMesim, go to Olam Haba. Okay, that's the system to perfect the perfectly imperfect world. But the same way creation has things in it that were created, the ha'oris panim, complete ruchni, a malach, or human neshama. And there are certain things in the world that are completely gashmi, a behemoth, the guf of a person. The Gemara Chagiga says that there are three major ways that man is like an animal, and three major ways that he's like a malach. That is what we're talking about, combining these two things successfully. That's a lifetime of work. But the same way that God created through or and choshech, through neshama and guf, through light and darkness, that's how God runs the world. We use the word hester panim. God hid himself. What do I mean he hid himself? It means he covered the light. The hastoris panim, he covered the light, and therefore, instead of the light shining on the dust of the earth and converting the dust of the earth into a spiritual holy thing, the Rebbeinu Shalom constricted the light, put up blinders, and not all the light was able to shine through on the dust, and the dust remained dense and heavy. And from there becomes a guf. That's called a hester panim. And that's how the guf was created. The guf was created from a hester panim, and the neshama was created from a ha'oras panim. That's creation. And now, post-creation, God runs the world post-creation using the same two traits. God runs the world ha'oras panim, a neshama type way, and God can run the world hester panim, where he hides the light. And loyalenu, when a person goes through bad times, Klal Yisrael go through bad times, loyalenu, it shouldn't happen. We call it a time of hastoras panim. God's face is hidden. What does it mean God's face is hidden? He's not shining upon us. The ha'oras panim, which means that God's doing good, is being covered up. It's always good, but we can't see it. So not only is the world created with these two qualities, quote unquote, ha'ora and hastara, but even after creation, the two source traits by which God runs the world, they're not his personal traits, he has no traits, but the traits that he uses, the mechanisms that he uses, the tools that he uses to run the world are the same tools he used to create the world. He used two tools to create the world: light, neshama, guf, hastoras panim. And now after the creation, he keeps on using those same two tools to run the world. So there's the time of ha'oras panim, and the time hastoras panim. We're all familiar with the famous pasuk in the Torah, and at the end of Chumash Shavorim, v'anochi astiris panai. God says, I will hide my face. In fact, the Gemara in Chulin, the famous Gemara, the Gemara says, is there a remes to Mordechai in the Torah? Is there a remes to Haman in the Torah? Is there a remes to Moshe in the Torah? Is there a remes to Esther? Now, that's a very interesting question. Esther didn't live in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Mordechai didn't live in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Haman didn't live in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara says there are hints to these three people in the Torah. And the Gemara says yes. The Gemara brings a pasuk. And the Gemara says, is there a hint to Moshe in the Torah? The Masha asks, what do you mean, is there a hint to Moshe in the Torah? His name's there. How many times is Moshe mentioned in the Torah? From the time he's born in Shemais, every parasha has his name except for Parashas Tetzaveh. Masha answers the question. But the Gemara asks, Esther min haTorah minayin. is there a hint somewhere in the Torah of this individual called Esther? The Gemara says yes. Vanochi hastir astir esponai bayom ha'u. God said that on that day, when Jews are not observant, or you have to learn the whole parsha in context, after the Jews do a partial tshuva, I can't go into the whole parsha now, it's a difficult parsha, you have to learn the Ramban there. Post a partial tshuva, there's hastorah. But the pasuk says, Anochi hastir astir, hastir astir, 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 sounds like Esther. So Gemara says, yes, there is a pasuk in the Torah that is a remez to Esther. It alludes to Esther. Vanochi hastir, astir, 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 Esther. Same letters. Aleph, Samach, Taf, Reish. That's the pasuk that is a remez to Esther. Let's look at the pasuk. Vanochi hastir, astir, panai. And on that day I will hide my face, the Tevunos Shalom says. And what does hide my face allude to? The time of Purim, the days of Esther. Not much more needs to be said. I've talked about this before. We've had these masks on that hide our face since about right after Purim. And we need to think about maybe why masks are still on and need to be on. From Purim, we're in Elul. And Purim is the time of Hastir Astir. It's the time where the face has to be covered. And that's one of the reasons why on Purim there's a minhag to wear masks. And after Purim was over, the masks stayed behind with us and we're still in Elul wearing masks. So we need to truly understand the miracle of Purim, what happened the days of Purim, how you get out of Purim, how do you move past Purim, can you move past Purim, all these kind of questions because they're still wearing masks that we put on shortly after Purim. But that's the idea of Hastaras Panim. God's light is not shining on a person. When a person puts on a mask, for example, you can't see if he's smiling really, you can't see if he's laughing, you can't see if he looks angry. It's a covered up situation. So the neshama is created from light. God is shining his light, and the guf is created from the tzimtzum, the covering up of that light. And therefore, the neshama, because its light wants to give, the guf, because it's not light, it's dense and dark, it just desires to take, give me. And that's not only the way the world was created, but that's the way the Rebbeinu Shalom supervises and runs the world post-creation. Ha'oras panim, ha'tova, or le'aleinu, chas v'sholom, we should know from it, hastoras panim. So the Ramchal says on page 63, the Friedlander's caption in the small letters, Makar HaGuf, the source material of the guf, where the guf come from, Hester Panav, God's hiding his light. Makar HaNeshama, the source from which the neshama comes, Ha'aras Panav, God shines his light, and the neshama comes. Vishlot HaNeshama, when the neshama rules and dominates the guf, Mizdake HaGuf, the guf becomes purified, Veniskan Adam, and a person perfects himself. We read one or two lines. Ramchal is saying now what we just explained. Umashahu b'hanhaga hu b'briya. Whatever you find in the way God supervises the world is because you find that in the way he created the world. He created the world with hastaras panim and ha'aras panim, which includes a guf and a neshama, and God's two major vehicles, mediums, mechanics, by which he runs the world, ha'aras panim and hastaras panim. So if we take a look at footnote 148 by Friedlander, the same way that ha'aras panim, light, v'hasta panim, and the hiding of the light, those are the two foundational ways that God runs the world. Those are the same two elements from which the guf and the neshama comes. Not only is these two things, hastaras panim, ha'aras panim, the material from which the world was created, post-creation, it is the way God runs the world. Back to the Ramchal. Because the dense, dark, thick material, like the guf, was created because of a hastoras panim. God did not allow the light to shine fully into it. He didn't let his light, his holy light, go into this material. Turns into a guf. And the ruchniim, the special, the honored ruchniim, were created with the light. And it's through these two elemental components that there's a connection between the guf and the neshama. What is the guf running after? The guf runs after guf. What I want, I desire. It's about me. I want more. I demand. I'm deserving. Magili. That's the guf talking. The neshama and all the things of the neshama, it's with light. What does light mean? I want to give. I want to do good for others. Forget about being self-centered and egomaniac. I got to control this guf. I got to rein in this horse. When a shama works on the guf, not only does the person, you have two things happening here. The person is perfecting himself, and he himself becomes perfect. In other words, it's not like a craftsman who has a piece of wood, who cuts the piece of wood, and now the piece of wood is better. It's not like a craftsman who paints a picture. It's him and the picture. The painter made a beautiful picture. When a person works on himself and perfects himself, he is the craftsman, and the perfection is he himself. The craft and the craftsman is one. A person perfects himself through the working on himself, and this comes from the Gemara in Tzadhen Daf Tzadik Tes Amud Beis, Vasisim Osam. The Torah says Vasisim Osam. You should do the mitzvahs. However, in the word Osam, there's missing a vav. Without the vav, the word can be read Atem. Instead of Vasisim Osam, you should do the mitzvahs. Vasisim Atem. You should make yourselves. A person was created perfectly imperfect, so he can perfect himself. And here's the pasuk. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Tzadik Tes, there's a vav missing in Vasisim Osam, and that means as a remez, instead of you should do the mitzvahs, it means you should do the mitzvahs so that you can perfect yourselves. Vasisim Atem. Perfect yourself by doing the mitzvahs. You have a double meaning in the pasuk. You perfect yourself, your perfectly imperfect self gets perfected by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Shadoshu Chazal, uviyodahu lahagri ba'atmes hagufnis udrachav ayruchnis udrachav. Man has a choice. The ultimate bechira is whether you're going to pick your guf to dominate the neshama, or you're going to pick the neshama to dominate your guf. As the Tanya explains early in the Sefer, people think bechira, and there is such a bechira. This is mini bechira. Should I daven today with the early minyan or with the later minyan? I have a taiva for a piece of chaza. Should I eat the chaza, not eat the chaza? I have a taiva to do this, I have a taiva to do that. And I'm making choices all the time. Those are mini choices. The Tanya talks about the choice. And the choice is, who are you? The Kotzker Rebbe's from Tzaddik Levacha also talks about this. He said it in Yiddish. Rosh Hashanah, I think he said Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Let's check. Check that in a second. Yeah, Rosh Hashanah. The Kotzker Rebbe said Rosh Hashanah. He said in Yiddish. In Rosh Hashanah, wird ois gemishpat vos var is. The judgment on Rosh Hashanah is not how many times did you daven late, how many times did you daven early, how much Lashon you speak. That's a small fry here. The big fry is, who are you? Are you a guf man? A guf lady? Are you a neshama man? Neshama lady. Everything else is fruits of the tree. If you're a guf man, we understand that you did all kinds of crazy things during the year. That's just fruits of a bad tree. If you're a neshama man, you're a neshama man, then you're a different person. Then there could be some rotten apples on the tree. You did a couple of things you shouldn't be doing that year. A footnote talks about this in the Pachad Yitzchak. You're a neshama man. There are a couple of bad fruits on the tree. Okay, a couple of bad fruits on the tree, but your roots and your source, you're a neshama man. You have elected, you made that big choice, not the mini choices, the big choice. I am working so that my neshama rules over my guf. That's the balabais in my life. I'm the neshama man. I'm the neshama woman. And then a lot of things fall into place. And Tanya talks about this early in the Sefer. The big bechira choice is, who are you? Just tell me who you are on Rosh Hashanah. Are you neshama man, neshama lady, guf man, guf lady? Who are you? Just define yourself for me. So the Ramchal says a person, first of all, has this is the big choice. Are you going to work so that the neshama controls your guf, or you're just going to give into the guf and let the guf control the neshama? Because a person keeps on following the wants of his heart, the wants of his physical, dark, dense, offerminadoma body. What you do is that lit neshama, that light of the neshama that was put in this guf, starts to dim. The more averis a person does, the person is born already with the infection of Eitz Hadas Tov Ra in him. That Eitz Hadas Tov Ra in him already makes him dense, dark, and every avera he does, he adds dense and darkness to his already dense and dark guf, and you're making the neshama work harder and harder. Lahavdil, a person's 20 pounds overweight, and he decides he wants to lose weight. He has 20 pounds he needs to lose. But he decides, before I'm going to go on the strict diet, I'm going out on a binge. And he gains 5 more pounds on his binge. Well, now he just created 5 more pounds worth of work. He doesn't have to lose 20 pounds, he has to lose 25 pounds. So when a person is born, he has the inherent perfectly imperfect guf, and in there, he's got to work to the extent he can in his 120 years to disinfect the infection called Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, which he'll never do in this lifetime. That's going to happen in the kever. But he's got to do as much as he can. But if he keeps on doing Aveirus Chashon in his lifetime, he added another pound and another pound, another pound, another pound, and now when he was born, he was only 20 pounds spiritually overweight, and he had to dump that. Now, after a lifetime, he's 50 pounds overweight. Now the neshama can't even breathe. It can't even walk up steps. It's so overweight. You're going, and he can't walk up the steps anymore because he's so overweight. And the neshama doesn't have the kaiches anymore. You need mamish ezim and hashemayim at that point. The Rosh Hashanah has to literally come in and help a person in a major, major, major way to be able to walk up the steps of Ruchnias and to be able to lose that extra pounds that he took upon himself. So a person can make this decision and say, Achrei Shviras Libi, I'm going to do whatever I want. Eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow you shall die. That's it. That's my life. So a person's magbir the guf over the neshama. What's the result of that? When you say that, you've made that big choice. I'm Mr. Guf, or I am Mrs. Guf. And what's Guf? It's a creation of darkness. And therefore, as we said earlier today, not only is creation made up of light and darkness, neshama and guf, but post-creation, God uses those 2 elements to run the world. So if you say, I am guf, the Baruch Shalom says, I'm sorry about that, you made a bad choice, but that's how I will have to run my affairs with you. You chose dense, dark guf, hastoras panim. I will send you never hastoras panim. This has nothing to do with bad guys being successful. Okay? It has nothing to do with that. Bad guys can be successful, and bad guys can do all kinds of things, and they're a cheshbonis. And some of these bad guys, they make a lot of money, and they're very famous, and then they overdose, and then they commit suicide because they're simply not happy. I don't know what the statistics are, but those who live in Hollywood, work in Hollywood, they have a tremendous rate of suicide there. A lot of money, a lot of glamour, your name is in light, and then you kill yourself. Money and glamour and your name is not what happiness is about. So a person can bring tremendous hester panim into his life with money, glamour, and me. That's a decision a person makes. So not only is he created that way, but if a person says, you know what, I am going to be guf. Rebbe Shalom says, well, if you're going to be guf, I'll tell you what, guf is hester panim. I'm going to run my affairs with you in hester panim. And the flip side of this is, if a person, his neshama is able to overpower that Yetzer Hara, and he takes himself off the path of silliness. Remember, I think I said last week we're going to talk about this word hevel. When we get to the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva B'lineh, they'll probably be next week when we get to this Rambam. The Rambam talks about hevel. The person says, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm neshama. I want my neshama to dominate guf. I miss the neshama, Mrs. Neshama. My neshama is working to dominate guf. To gabra neshama guf. Then the light of the neshama can start working on the guf and light up the guf. And then it can purify the guf itself. Stop here for today. We're going to take a look tomorrow at Friedlader's footnote 149. And the Ramchal is going to go on to a discussion about earlier generations and how they dealt with guf and neshama. And unfortunately, the Yeridas Hadoros, which we see Ramchal's writing in like 1710, 1720, and he's talking about the Yeridas Hadoros. And we are 300 years later plus, and it's unimaginable what Yeridas Hadoros we're talking about today. The Baruch Shalom should give us kaiches to be able to live up to these things that the Ramchal is talking about.